All right, welcome back to The Explainer. I'm your host, and today we are opening up what I literally call the ultimate examiner's playbook. Look, if you're prepping for your Cambridge AS and A-level accounting exams, specifically syllabus 9706, you already know the deal. You know that securing those top-tier A and A-star mark bands requires way more than just memorizing a few textbook formulas. It requires getting right inside the examiner's head. It requires you to act like a curriculum architect. So today we're targeting a very specific, incredibly high-stakes topic: business acquisition and merger. And we are focusing entirely on goodwill calculation. We're going to break down exactly what the mark schemes demand, we'll decode the hidden expectations, and we are going to build a bulletproof structural strategy to help you completely dominate this section. No more second guessing, no more dropping easy marks. We're getting right to the core of it. Now, I want you to listen to this direct statement pulled straight from the Global Principal Examiner Report. Quote, "Examiners report that business acquisition and merger, goodwill calculation, is one of the most misunderstood areas in accounting." Let that sink in for a second. This isn't just a slightly tough topic. This is a global stumbling block. This is the exact spot where thousands of candidates consistently, year after year, drop crucial marks. But you know what? That establishes the stakes for us perfectly. Because by the end of this explainer, we are going to fix this precise knowledge gap once and for all. You're going to see exactly where everyone else falls short and exactly how you can capitalize on those areas to push your grade into that top tier. So here's our structural framework for today's masterclass. First, core principles of goodwill. Second, the standardized processing sequence. Third, top 3 costly exam mistakes. And finally, unlocking high-band evaluative marks. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, Core Principles of Goodwill. Right, we need to start with the theoretical architecture demanded by the Cambridge syllabus. Because before you punch a single number into your calculator, you have to understand the why behind the calculation. The assessment framework here heavily prioritizes analytical depth over superficial breadth. Think about it like this. I see 2 types of students all the time when I'm coaching. Let's call them Alex and Sam. You put a past paper in front of Alex, and Alex frantically overloads the paragraph with raw factual definitions, just dumping Assessment Objective 1, AO1, knowledge onto the page. But there's zero deep analysis. Then you've got Sam. Sam is a fast writer, constructing these highly persuasive arguments, but completely misses the explicit restrictions set by the command words in the prompt. Both of them lose marks. Why? Because raw memorization isn't enough. Cambridge examiners want to see true conceptual understanding. That means a mastery resting on precise definitions, understanding causal relationships, and critically, this is the secret sauce: integration with cross-topic syllabus areas. The syllabus clearly highlights that top-performing students exhibit a connected understanding that transfers to unfamiliar contexts. So if you can reference cross-topic connections, like, say, linking the goodwill arising in a merger to partnership capital accounts or company equity structures, you immediately signal to the examiner that you truly comprehend the entire accounting ecosystem. You aren't just reciting a definition. You're showing how the machine works. And that is the key to unlocking significantly higher marks. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we actually retain this stuff. To encode these complex, multi-stage concepts into our memory, we can use something I call the visual story method. Instead of viewing goodwill calculation as some dry, isolated mathematical chore that you just dread doing, I want you to visualize it as a dramatic corporate merger narrative. Literally picture it in your head. Imagine Company A is physically absorbing Company B. Goodwill isn't just a leftover mathematical remainder on a balance sheet, it's the massive premium paid for Company B's stellar reputation, their fiercely loyal customer base, their established shiny brand. When you visualize the calculation as the story of a corporate buyout, the steps, valuing the assets, determining the purchase consideration, and finally finding the difference between the two, they just logically flow into one another. It stops being a rigid formula that you might forget under exam pressure, and it starts being a story that naturally unfolds. Moving right along to Section 2. The standardized processing sequence. Okay, let's shift our focus from the underlying theory to tactical, on-the-ground execution. Because understanding the concept is just step 1, but data interpretation under extreme exam pressure, with the clock ticking down, that requires a highly methodical approach. I call this managing your marks per minute formula. You simply cannot afford to get lost in the weeds. This 5-step list is the exact systematic sequence demanded by the syllabus to extract data from complex texts and tables. Think of this as your non-negotiable operational checklist. Step 1, identify key elements from the provided data. This is your 3-step question scan. Highlight the core numbers, the dates, the specific command words. Step 2, apply the relevant accounting principles. Step 3, execute the analysis with clear, logical workings. Step 4, verify your results. Ask yourself, does the calculated goodwill actually make sense in the context of the prompt? If the company is failing, why is goodwill massively positive?
Catch your own errors. And finally, step 5, present your findings in the appropriate format. Look, practical application develops your professional skills. The examiners are grading you not just on that final digit at the bottom of the page, but on how professionally, cleanly, and systematically you navigate this exact sequence. And that brings us to an absolutely crucial examiner alert, the method mark strategy. Guys, I literally cannot emphasize this enough. You must show you're working. Examiners explicitly state in their reports that candidates lose severe marks simply by not detailing their calculations. Think about the marking grid. Even if you completely panic, mess up a basic subtraction, and your final answer is entirely wrong, method marks can literally save your grade from dropping a whole letter. The examiner awards marks for the process. If they can clearly see you applied the right principle back in step 2, you get the mark, regardless of a stupid calculator typo in step 3. Let's pause for a second. Let's really think about this. Why do so many candidates drop guaranteed method marks right here? Think about your own past paper practice. Are you rushing to get to the final answer? Are you doing the multi-stage analysis in your head to save time because you think it makes you faster? Let me tell you a secret. That illusion of speed is exactly what costs candidates their A-star. You have to make your invisible thinking visible to the examiner. If it's only in your head, the examiner can't mark it. Period. All right, let's jump into Section 3, Top 3 Costly Exam Mistakes. This brings us perfectly into the trap avoidance phase of our playbook. Based directly on global principal examiner reports, I want you to print these 3 most common pitfalls into your memory right now. Let's do a little spot the examiner trap exercise. Number 1, confusing cause and effect in the multi-stage analysis. This happens all the time. Students will mix up why an adjustment is being made during an acquisition versus the result of that adjustment. If you get the causality backward, your whole analysis collapses. Number 2, forgetting to check format and presentation. Remember, accounting is a professional discipline. It's not just math. If you use the wrong terminology or you hand in a sloppy, unstructured format, you are going to drop marks. Even if the underlying math is 100% correct, you have to do your post-writing compliance audit. And number 3, providing answers not specific to the given context. Listen, if the case study is about a massive manufacturing merger and your evaluative paragraph just copy-pastes generic textbook definitions about retail Goodwill, you will not get the marks. Your answers must be rigidly anchored to the specific scenario provided on the page. Context is everything. Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 4, Unlocking High-Band Evaluative Marks. Okay, pay close attention because this is the critical system upgrade required to push past those B and C grades and lock in the A and A-star marks. There is a hard, very clear dividing line between an average candidate and a top-tier candidate, and it all comes down to decoding Cambridge command words. Lower bands get stuck in descriptive and analytical thinking. When the prompt says analyze, they provide basic textbook data inputs and simply describe what happened. But top-tier bands, they use evaluative thinking. When they see command words like evaluate or to what extent, they deploy a universal structural matrix, something like the PL framework, point, evidence, explanation, link. These candidates don't just state the facts, they actively question assumptions, they evaluate the raw quality of the evidence, they consider completely different perspectives, and they fiercely justify every single decision with hard evidence pulled directly from the text. They aren't just reciting, they are judging. So, how do you actually trigger those top-tier assessment objectives on the examiner's grid? You need to execute specific evaluative actions in your written responses. Let's break them down. First, you need to identify the limitations of the data you've been given. Is the asset valuation out of date? Say so. Second, note any assumptions that were made during the Goodwill calculation. Did management assume brand loyalty would stay exactly the same post-merger? Point that out. Third, evaluate alternative interpretations. What if the assets were valued differently? What if the purchase consideration was structured differently? Fourth, compare different approaches to the merger. And finally, always justify your final recommendations. You have to drop the hammer and make a decision. When you shift your paragraph from simply stating Goodwill is X to writing something like Goodwill is X, assuming that asset revaluation provided is accurate, however, an alternative approach might suggest Y due to these specific market conditions, boom, you are suddenly speaking the exact language of the chief examiner. That is how you yield maximum marks. So let's look back at the master framework we just conquered today.
We covered the core principles, proving that you need to link concepts across the syllabus. We locked down the 5-step standardized processing sequence and highlighted the critical importance of the method mark strategy. Remember, show your workings. We highlighted the top 3 costly exam mistakes to help you dodge those examiner traps. And finally, we discussed unlocking high-band evaluative marks by shifting completely from descriptive writing to critical, justified evaluation using structural frameworks.
Look, strategy check. Before you sit down to crush your upcoming study sessions, make sure your revision feed is perfectly optimized. Take a second right now to subscribe to Ace the Exams at the handle @AceTheExams and hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly Cambridge exam breakdowns. Whether you're sitting for IGCSE, O-levels, or AS and A-levels, we have got you covered. But remember, the jump from theory to execution only happens when you test yourself under timed conditions using these precise strategies. You have to put the reps in with past paper practice.
I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to take into your very next study session. What assumptions are you failing to question in your own Goodwill calculations? Seriously, stop taking the numbers at face value. Start thinking like an examiner, start demanding hard evidence, and start questioning every single assumption on the page. Drop a comment below sharing exactly which Cambridge subject and level you are preparing to conquer next. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer, and I will see you in the next masterclass.